I'd like to call the meeting to order. We can do a roll call.
Chris Brune. Here. Ray Lapinus. Here. Connie Machini. Here. Carolyn Schofield. Here. Lindsay Keisman.
Here. Any public comments? Did I get the sheet? Thank you. All right. Okay, Suzanne Hoban.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to come up and talk a little bit. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Suzanne Hogan with the Family Health Partnership Clinic. Everyone on? No.
Yep.
Perfect. Then I'll say all the bad things now. Okay. All right, go right into it. And the Mental Health Board has got a supporter of the clinic. Is it still working? Good? We're good? Okay. For almost 28 years, which is as long as the clinic has been in existence. And in fact, the Mental Health Board was one of 3 organizations countywide to sit on the planning and help launch the Family Health Partnership Clinic. So we owe a lot of our roots back to the Mental Health Board. And part of the reason the Mental Health Board got involved with us was because we wanted to ensure that mental health and physical health were not separated. The vast majority of psychotropic medications are actually prescribed at the primary care level, and you simply cannot pull those things apart. And so for many years, the Mental Health Board has been funding both a therapist for us as well as our patient navigator, and that is really, really appreciated. So thank you for that. The only other thing I really wanted to touch on was just a piece of conversation that I heard at one of the previous board meetings about duplication of services. And I want to assure you from a provider view, we are not seeing duplication of services. Are there multiple organizations who have therapy services? Yeah, absolutely. Some are for veterans. Some are for only Spanish-speaking individuals. There's a lot of variety in this, and I would say that to an organization, we are all backed up. So when we start talking about consolidation and shrinking of duplicative services, what we really are talking about is decreasing capacity of services. So I really want you to take that into consideration as you move forward with your budget process, and know that as providers who are out there day after day, we are ridiculously cost conscious about these kinds of issues. And we're very sympathetic to the financial state that we are finding ourselves in right now. But I just urge you to tread lightly as you discuss and contemplate trying to merge services, because there are a variety of them out there, some of that seem similar. That's because the demand is out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Abby Nicholas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Abby Nicholas. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI, McHenry County. I know all of you here, so I think all of you know who NAMI is. But for anyone listening, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we provide free mental health services here in our community. And just like Suzanne said, NAMI has been a longtime partner of the Mental Health Board, has received funding for a really long time. And really, my understanding is the Mental Health Board funds is what allowed NAMI to really gain a traction and a foothold here in McHenry County. There are a lot of NAMIs across the state and across the country who are completely volunteer run. We now have 10 staff. We are a really robust NAMI who offers very, amazing programs and services here, and people come from other counties to seek the services that we provide. We really fill a crucial gap here in our community because the services we offer are free. So we don't do any sort of billing, we aren't reliant on Medicaid, but we are able to see people next day, people who need support, people who need linkage to resources, referrals, and help them access those. So we're just so grateful for the support you provide for all of our programs and services here in our community. I know you all have a lot of things that you're discussing right now at the finance level and at the board level, obviously with the sales tax not being what we thought it was, and a lot of tough decisions, are having to be made. So first of all, thank you all for taking the time to look at all of the options, weigh them carefully, and I don't envy your position because I know it's a really tough one. I did want to speak to a couple of conversations I know you all have been having. One is just about this building in general. I wanted to just speak as a tenant here of the building. So NAMI, if you don't know, rents on the other side of the building. We operate all of our programs and services from this building, and we are so grateful for this space. This space really allows us to provide our programs and services at a good cost. The rent is really fair and affordable for us. And in addition, being able to use these meeting rooms, I know I can speak for all the other providers too, these rooms are so crucial to what we do. We host trainings here, volunteer events, our board meetings. I mean, there's so much we do here that is really hard to find space like this out in the community to do what we do. So just wanted to speak to that aspect. The other thing I'll just say is, I know based on the county projections, they provided that spreadsheet, there are, a couple of years of funds that we can kind of use the reserves for a little bit to maintain where we are. I guess I would just ask you to not rush to make any really drastic changes right now. Just because there is so much uncertainty in our country between the Medicaid potential cuts, between things going on. There's a lot of uncertainty already, and I would hate for you all to make a really drastic change now and us regret it later. So between, I would just ask that you wait, kind of see what legislation passes, what comes down at the national level before making any changes that might have really big impacts on us providers that we can't undo. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby. Are there any other public comments? Okay. Connie, would you like to make a comment? That's okay. Press your button. Hold on.
Okay. I just wanted the board to know with the annual message that I'm redoing it significantly. So if you got the message that was written for the annual report, I just want you to know that it will be a little bit different than what it is. And look forward to it then. I've had lots of conversation about it, so just to let you know it's going to be different.
Okay, great. Any other board member comments at this time? Okay, let's move on to the approval of the minutes for the January 21st, 2025 Finance and Audit meeting. I need a motion.
I make the motion to approve it, the January 21st Finance and Audit meeting minutes.
Okay, a second? Ray seconds. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes approved. All right, there are no specific treasurer reports at this time, so I'll move forward to old business and our fund balance policy. I wanted to bring forth our fund balance policy discussion as it does relate to decisions that we would make for how much fund balance to use in the next budget cycle, and recommendations, which in front of you is a copy of the template we've been using with the county's help that forecasts. And so as a reminder, we did use some forecasting for 3-month, 4-month, and 5-month, and our current fund balance policy is set to 5 months. I have asked Mel if she could give us some explanation for why it was historically set to 5 months on our property tax and what the implications of reducing it down to 3 months would be with our new sales tax cash flow. So Mel, if you could. Are you guessed?
So in the past, it has been 5 months because there was a 5-month period every year where we waited for property taxes. So we needed, cash available to pay our bills until property taxes came in. And then, as the installments came in, it would replenish the cash balance and the fund balance that had been used. So that 5 months is no longer applicable because we're on sales tax. But now, instead of 5 months, we have a 3-month delay in property taxes. So even though we're getting taxes monthly, fiscal year '25 sales taxes do not start being collected until March. So now, in theory, we have a 3-month delay. It doesn't impact us right now because we do have, a large cash reserve from the sales tax we did collect in '24. But going forward, as we use the fund balance and as we see that every month we're going to be spending probably $200,000 more than we're taking in, that fund balance will be important and, necessary to have. At this point, it's hard to really make a true recommendation of what the fund balance policy should be because we really don't have any history with the sales tax. But the nice thing we do see using that forecast model is we really have some time before we're actually going to get, to a point where we're going to hit that limit. So we could at this time, do a 3-month and then reevaluate as time goes by if we see that, that's not working. And, we have the flexibility to go in and change that policy before we get to a point where, we're below a fund balance level we're comfortable at. So, any questions?
So at this time, one of the reasons we would want to move to change our fund balance policy, there was some early discussion about how we had time before we could change this, but from a forecasting perspective, it actually comes into play much sooner. As if we feel that a 3-month fund reserve is unsustainable, then we wouldn't use, we would end up in the red if we stay in a 4 or 5-month fund balance policy. So I wanted some discussion today, and just to, in front of you, you'll see that we're still in the green in 2027, no matter what we do. So at this point, if our finance committee wanted to engage in some discussion about moving to a 3-month reserve, knowing that we would have 2 years of data with sales tax, we would have 2 years of data with anything that could happen with economy, we would have information relating to some of the concerns our funded providers have, that if we wanted to make the fund balance policy reserve 3 months, that we would have the opportunity to shift back if we had to. Furthermore, I wanted to bring this up because there was some discussion in building and grounds, and I know I've had discussions with a couple of members that there's some concerns about proper forecasting, what we could put in our administrative budget, and then some of the struggles with unforeseen, potentially expensive repairs. And the truth is that if we budgeted for HVAC units and we needed that and some, we would have to make a decision either to move things in our administrative budget if we had it, or we'd have to dip into fund balance if it's there. But if we get down to, let's say, a 3-month reserve, and that's what we choose, a 4-month reserve or a 5-month reserve, then we wouldn't be able to do that. So all of these conversations, I think, are happening right now, and they're interrelated. So I wanted to open it up to some discussion. Once again, my perspective on this is if we choose a 3-month reserve, we can get all the way to 2031 with a flat funding model, meaning funding the providers at the level that we funded in this current fiscal year. Utilizing our current fund balance, assuming that all of the projections are accurate, which we would have to reevaluate probably annually. And so I think we would also reevaluate our fund balance policy annually as well. So I wanted to open it up and see where people feel about this, so that moving into our next committee meeting, we'd like to give staff some instruction to come back with us with a new fund balance policy so that we can approve it, as it does relate then to the budget decisions that we need to make, which we also need to make some of those instructions today so that we can stay on schedule. All right, Chris?
Thank you. I don't have any objections to moving to the 3-month reserve operating cost model. I think that it might be wise of us, we've talked about building and grounds, and the county projections indicated that our administrative non-personnel costs are estimated to decrease over the course of time, and I don't think they will, because I think we're looking at potentially some repairs to the building. I think there's the word roof came up at one point in time, and so then the question is, when would the recommendations for those repairs to be made come into play? And how do we ensure that in addition to having our reserve operating costs, we also have enough on hand to be able to, to kind of make sure we're maintaining the building responsibly? So, I think that this needs to be contextualized by examination of anticipated building costs and, parsing that out over the course of time. How much do we need to make sure that we're retaining to be able to pay for those things? And the other concern is, like you said, this model is forecast based on an assumption of a certain degree of increase in sales tax. And, if we experience economic recession, then we will not experience that same degree of increase in sales tax, because those are more vulnerable than the property taxes would have been to economic recession. And so, recognizing the tracking, I think, closely the rate of increase of sales tax is going to be necessary for us to be very appraised of when we're going to turn from green to yellow.
Yeah. I agree. Ray?
I have no problem also with the 3-month reserve. We did have a discussion with regard to investing funds. Is that something that's a potential if we move to 3-month, like a money market or a short-term CD, so we could get some investment income?
So my understanding is we would take any of the excess dollars above and beyond what we have in our fund balance if we're going to go all the way down to a 3-month. So for the next 2 to 3 years, we would have that option. And if we would like the staff to revisit those options and present to it, we can request that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Thanks, and I'll just chime in also. I am also comfortable with getting down to that 3-month reserve, but also thinking if we want to make the policy now, but it would be over time that we would get to that point. And I like the combination of all the ideas between Chris and Ray and your mention of taking that money and finding investment opportunities for it. I also wanted to note that we talked about in building and grounds about doing a 5-year capital plan. And I think, and Bridget had agreed to kind of put some numbers together for us. So that would be awesome if we then could incorporate that into the outlook in these numbers and get us a better idea in refining those total expenses. I think that's a critical piece, or else leaving some sort of, whether it's like a month of the reserve being dedicated to potential capital improvements, or really trying to pin down that 5-year capital plan and incorporating it into here. But I do think that's a critical piece, given the age of the building and some of the things that we are facing right now, in order to make sure that those are captured within these projections.
I agree with everybody.
Okay. You don't want to put on your microphone to say that?
I agree with
Right, right.
3 months too. I'm sorry.
Say it again.
I agree with 3 months too, that we can go down to it, but I also think what Chris suggested, we need to also lay out what our capital needs are and how much we're going to invest.
So what I'm hearing is everybody is comfortable with us making adjustments to the fund balance policy down to the 3-month reserve, and that we want to investigate options for investment for any available funds and have that presented back to us, and that as we get clearer information on the building expenses, that then we would revisit what these projections would be. Is that? Chris?
Yeah, I think that building expenses should be, like, the projection should be revised to account for what we need to save for building expenses, and that, we're also, potentially able to forecast more than one model. You know how we've got the 5-month, the 4-month, and the 3 months. So we could forecast different models based on different projected rates of sales tax increase, so that we would know if it increases this much, then we can continue to have that fund at this rate until this time.
Carolyn?
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing. I don't mind setting the policy of a 3-month policy in anticipation of where we're going to end up in the future. But I want to have that caveat of how you said we could revisit it on an annual basis if need be, just because I would like to really see this full year. And I think we've always talked about, let's give it a year. I mean, Melanie mentioned it. I really think it's a year to 2 years even, probably, to really get a solid idea of this sales tax transition and what we're going to be seeing. So, I would be comfortable with 3 months, but really finding out what that means, I think is going to take probably 2 years before we really understand it. So allowing that flexibility within there. I think as long as we're still, cautious in the path we're taking in those next 2 years and not going crazy and spending all that extra that we've accumulated from the overlap dollars, but and investing that, I think it would give you that opportunity. So I just wanted to say I'm comfortable giving that little asterisk of it can be revisited. So thanks.
Correct. I will tag on to what you said, Chris. I know Mel had said that the county, I think, used 103.5% for sales tax. Was that it? Yeah. So they were projecting 3.5% increase in sales tax every year. And even after a year, after 2 years, we'll have a better understanding of that and whether or not any economic recession occurs. So just, I want to make sure I understand, is that the kind of modeling that would be helpful for you, Chris, is some sort of delineation of, is it matching year to year? Is it 1%, 2%, 3%? Okay. So branching out into this document. Okay. Any further discussion on this? No? Okay. Bridget, remind me, do we need a motion to get the fund balance draft done, or is that fine for us to do that next time?
No, she can do a draft and then you can vote on it next time.
Perfect, thank you.
It doesn't have to go to the board?
It does.
It will.
But she can do a draft and then you can vote on it. She can do it right by draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the plan will be to present all of these. We will be meeting again in 2 weeks for Finance Committee because this was a special meeting. So we'll come back and lay our eyes on this, and then whatever we want to move forward to the board would go to our next meeting. Okay. All right, moving on to new business, the budget process and timeline. I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the conversations that we've been having, from our board retreat day to different discussions, and I would really like to get us all on the same pathway with semantics. I've been hearing some people say the word budget when I think they mean allocations, and interchanging them. So I have asked Mel to kind of take the full year and explain to us sort of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done for budgeting purposes, allocation purposes, et cetera, so that we can focus in on what is right in front of us, what we need to work on today, but also appreciating that we've got some new members on our Finance Committee. A little bit of a reminder on that would be great. So Mel, to you.
Okay, so right now, staff is working to develop the budget. We're having discussions on, what different areas need, software needs, or like the audit coming up, we need a CARF audit next year. So it's just, we're kind of putting together the budget for you guys. Typically in the past, you have first seen the draft budget in April. Leo has asked me to have it available for the March 18th meeting, so you guys have more time to review. So the goal is to have the first draft of the 26 budget to you on March 18th, so in 2 weeks. At that time, you can review it, ask questions. It will then go to the board for review in April. And then it's typically approved at the May meeting. In June, we enter our budget into the county system. We also have meetings with county admin and the public health presentation in June and July. Then the county budget goes up for display in October, and the final draft is approved in November. So our budget is still going to be presented, and it's my understanding, with the county budget. So even though they're just being informed now, they're not officially approving our budget, it'll still be rolled into the full county budget. So that is the timeline. As far as the process goes, the staff works together to develop a budget that we feel should be appropriate for the administrative expenses. We review personnel, what we expect health insurance to go up by, and all these things will be indicated in a column on the budget, explaining why things are set where they are. I'm also open to any questions, either at the meeting or, if you have specific questions you have for the budget, just feel free to reach out to me. But like I said, that'll be coming in 2 weeks. And just kind of to separate the budget process from the allocation process, at this point, we're not concerned how the money is going to providers. We're just determining the pool of money that's going to the providers. So questioning whether we're going to fund something or not fund something is not really part of this process. The actual allocation process begins in June when the application opens up. So any questions from anybody?
Okay. Carolyn?
And I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to make a point, and I don't know if right now is a good time, but it seems like it, because you're bringing up the allocation piece. And I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate the kind of the understanding of the timeline, because I think this year in particular is even more critical of this timeline and really sticking to this timeline and sticking to the budget that we have. For the past 2 years, there's been a little more unknown, I guess, because of you didn't know what the levy was going to be. You didn't know what the county board was going to do, if it was going to actually increase it or where we were going to be. But I think that the projections, even though they are going to be somewhat projections in the sales tax, I think we can actually tighten up that allocation and really understanding what that number needs to be. And I mean, if we want to, we'll make the decision if we wanted to add some from our reserves or how we wanted to make that number. But I just want to say it now, and I'll probably say it almost every month until we do the allocations, that I think it's going to be more critical than ever to get that number pretty right at the beginning and then stick to it. So then when we are in allocations, and it's been said before, and honestly, I'm as guilty as probably any other board member, that we kind of forget, if we're going to change one program, we have to be able to have an offsetting to another to really stick to what that number is we put for allocations into the budget. So spending that time up front, I think, is going to be critical. And, the next couple months will determine that. But I just wanted to make emphasis on that I think we really need to look closely at that allocation number in particular and stick to it once we put it in the budget.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Let's move on to 6B, Board Development Meeting, the efficiency suggestions. So in front of you, you have a document that Melanie organized from our sticky note activity. So from this, there were specific things that had to do with efficiencies, and we've separated them into 4 sections: allocations, transportation, mental health budget, and agency efficiencies. And part of what I hope for us to do in our finance committee is to start talking about these as they're relevant. So speaking to the timeline, I would want us to postpone any discussions about allocations and getting kind of into the weeds of the bullet point 1 and 2 under allocations, because we can have those conversations at a future meeting. And then transportation, I think that that was addressed at our latest board meeting from Leo. So I'm not sure that that is relevant for us to get into today unless somebody else feels strongly. But there were some suggestions under our mental health board budget to consider cutting admin expenses, some talk of the associate director position, zero-based budgeting to determine use of budget line items, look at any efficiencies within our administrative budget. I'll say that again, administrative budget, not allocations for client services. And then investigating technology options to reduce admin expenses. So I just wanted to open up some discussion. There's also the agency efficiencies around resource sharing, utilization of interns, assisting agencies by maximizing their opportunities with peers, and just see if there's anything that we want to discuss today, in particular with our mental health board budget that is coming up in 2 weeks. So I'd love for us to open some conversation if anybody has some strong feelings about efficiencies, the associate director position, or any technologies that they had in mind. Ray?
With regard to not hiring an associate director, I have a concern with Leo mentioning that she's looking at retiring in 2027, that we don't want to be put into the predicament when we were looking for Leo's position. It took us almost a year.
Okay. Carolyn?
I'll say a couple things. First, just in response to what you had said, Ray, while I appreciate succession plans, I fundamentally have an issue with an associate director being hired for that reason, from the standpoint of the board hires the executive director, but the board wouldn't hire an associate director. So I just think if that was the plan and the reason as to why, it would kind of skip the fundamental duty of a board, which would be to hire the executive director. So if that's the reason why, I wouldn't support it, because I think the board needs to, that's one of our prime responsibilities, is hiring the executive director. So I want to make sure that stays in place and not have a workaround that way. That's all I'll say on that one. I wanted to clarify a couple things on efficiencies, especially in light of comments that were made earlier. The one efficiency, and we did talk about it, and I will bring it up again, is transportation. I just think there's a lot of opportunities there. I think it was a great meeting at Network Council, that some feedback from providers that they actually would, their clients would actually get more out of having some transportation needs shifted to the county. And I've just been working on it for years, of trying to get kind of a transportation hub, if you will, and have talked to a number of providers too that would really like to take that off of them and utilize the county for that service. I don't think it'll eliminate it altogether, but I think it's definitely one area that we can try to partner with the county in a better manner than we currently do, to take some of the money out of there and be able to put that into the services. And then what I was also looking for, and we'll clarify on efficiencies, is maybe opportunities for community partnerships. And I think of, in particular, when there's new programs that come on, if we can't fund them, then maybe creating partnerships or finding either within the county, or I know there's been a couple, because I work in Kane also, that Kane may have opportunities, and just having the ability to use them as resources, and maybe say, well, we are not able to provide here, but we can start that conversation or that relationship with someone that you might be able to start that program with, or share what they're already doing in King County, let's say. So I just think it's kind of critical to build on those relationships and opportunities, when we can't necessarily to provide that service here. So that's where I was kind of looking from an efficiency standpoint.
Can I ask a clarification question on that, just so I can understand what, if we were going to give a specific direction to staff, what would that look like with community partnerships? Oh, that's okay. That's okay, hold on. There you go.
I just, well, I'll use an example. And I know I've used this example a lot of times. And it was how the social work program with the Sheriff's Department was founded. the mental health board wanted to help in some way. I sat down when I was a county board member, Scott Block and I had met, and he said, I'd really like to connect with the sheriff's department because I have this idea, and we'd really like to work with them to be able to do that, knowing the mental health board couldn't fund that program, but could be a piece of that. So that would be one of the ideas, like if there's something that the mental health board would like to take on, but knows that we couldn't fully fund, looking for those opportunities to partner with. In another example, I think of a new provider, that was wanting to bring a service here. And then when I was actually at work, I found that exact service in Kane. And it was one that's like in Kane, it's in Will, like they do it, they're partnering and they're adding on, like it's a bigger organization. So it just might be an opportunity. Like a lot of times it goes a long way if, somebody from the mental health board then sits down or calls and says, well, we have someone here that's willing to do it. Can we find a way to partner, or can you find a way to make this work? I mean, I guess that's just kind of that connections and communication. And sometimes it goes a long way when you have like the backing of the mental health board, not financially, but just, physically and so those are just a couple of them that I can think of off the top of my head.
Thanks. I'm just trying to be mindful of, making sure that we're giving directives, if we've got concepts, kind of what it would look like to operationalize it, because I think it's helpful for staff. So thanks. All right. Connie.
I also agree on not bringing on an associate director during this time, because we would not be responsible as a board to hire that person. We are responsible to hire the executive director. And I think if we brought somebody on, they're with the understanding they're going to be the executive director and we have no input. I'm against personally hiring, especially in this time where we're looking at budget cuts to agencies. I don't think this is the time to even consider it. My other thing is in transportation, I know that Leo expressed that we do things differently, but I still think there's some savings if we get together with the county and talk about what they do and how we can get it to, I didn't know until I went to people in need that if you've got a card, reduced fare card, you can get a ride anywhere for $4. And if you don't have the $4, there's people that will pay for it so you can get a ride. I didn't know that. I think that there's still more things that can be done with transportation. I agree with Carolyn that we need to pursue that. I think and I could be wrong, are we paying out about $1,000 to Kaizen? $100,000 to Kaizen?
It's 90,000 this year.
Okay, 90,000. We could maybe wrap that into a county program.
Talk to your microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, we could maybe wrap that in, and they still would have use of it, but there'd be one person in charge of it all and checking on, could you use this or could you use that? I think we need to look at that. That's my 2 cents.
I want to open up some additional conversation around the associate director position as the issue of succession planning was brought up, and it seems like the main pain point is that we would want to, have input into who would be in that position. So is it, and I heard you say just it's extra expenses too, but if we were looking at succession planning and had the ability to hire, I don't know what you'd call that role, Abby Nicholas probably had some title when she was this, and Mr. Campbell was stepping out, but, there's some period of overlap. Is that something we want to consider in FY26? Because it is a part of the budget, even if we want to have the dollars for a portion of the year and some ability to do that. All right, Chris.
So I have mixed feelings about the associate director role. I think one thing is that, it would be really great to have somebody who knows how to do this job when they have to start doing this job. If we were to hire an associate director, it does not mean we have to hire them full-time. It does not mean that we have to hire that person as the executive director. It's a competitive search. the person would be potentially well qualified to serve in that role, but that does not mean that they have to be that person. When I think about it, I think that half of the benefit maybe of having an associate director would be that, Leo is obviously, her time is in demand. And we've talked about some initiatives that we'd like to see explored, like the idea of partnering with entities providing services in neighboring counties to see if that can be extended into our county. I know, kind of as Abby brought up, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of federal funding, but I have wanted, us to take a role in holding the state accountable for getting people off the PUNS list, like they were obligated to do. I would love to see us create an initiative for permanent supportive housing for people with chronic and severe mental illness. And it's hard to do those things. It's hard to create the efficiencies that we've talked about when Leo's basically already got a full-time job, and then we're going to put more stuff on top of that. Other efficiencies that I've heard talked about are maybe the idea that agencies can partner together when they purchase insurance. Well, that takes some coordination. Like, who is going to do that, If agencies have their own transportation, fleet management is a thing that we could create opportunities of scale around if people partner together on that. But somebody needs to be able to coordinate those efforts, and if there is, that's not part of Leo's job right now. So that's kind of come into my mind when we've thought about, this role.
I will add in, I know Leo's not here, but I know she has mentioned also our initiatives with the grant writer, which I know many of us are hoping for more, has been time-consuming. And as she was discussing the roles of an associate, director, that is some of the work that is really operations and time-sensitive that, could be off of her plate. And I was thinking of your earlier comment, Carolyn, about some of these community connections, and I remember our board retreat day when we were doing our strategic, 3-year plan, and I think one of the phrases we put out there is that we wanted to have visionary leadership, I think was the term that we threw around, which I think speaks to what you're talking about, and it is a capacity issue. I am sensitive to the idea that this is not just a succession plan, right? Because it's a decision we'd have to make, because otherwise it's an associate director and a director position, of which maybe that person would be well-suited to apply for an executive director position. But long-term, it is two positions, and I think we should consider what that would mean, not only for an ease of succession planning, and making sure operations are functioning with that coming up, but also, how many dollars could we invest in a person that then might come back to us if we had the time and capacity to do it, is always a question, that comes to my mind. Connie?
If we had an associate director and they had the understanding, I will tell you, that they were going to be the executive director, and what Chris is saying, even if you had, I'm against it, I want to say that, but even if you had it, it doesn't mean that that person's going to step in. Mm-hmm. And people think, this associate director is exactly going to take over, and that's not necessarily the facts. That's all I want to say.
Carolyn?
Well, and I guess I'll add to that too, like, I'm not really clear what the associate director role would be. So, I'd kind of have to see what duties they would be performing or what their responsibilities would be to have an understanding. I mean, right now, there's some things that, I'd like to see, like we were talking about with the partnerships, but at the same time, I don't know if it's just a reprioritization of others or if it's, a need of others. I don't know. So I can't say one way or the other. I mean, I'm with Connie that, there would have to be the clear understanding this is not for succession planning. And it could be even, honestly, to their demise, I mean, if you didn't perform and really do well in that position, then and you have to interview for the director position, sometimes you're at a disadvantage. because you'd have a year or two under your belt, and the new people coming in would not have any of that. So it could be a good bet, I guess, but at the same time, I wanted to make that point clear, that it would still have, that could not be a point of the responsibilities or duties, that it would be the next executive director, so. But I would like to see, I mean, usually when you put a role like this together, there would be a list of what it would entail, so, I would need to see that first.
I think that's a fair ask to bring that hopefully to the next meeting, if possible, of what an associate director without the intention of succession planning would look like as a long-term job, responsibility. And, is it a, one FTE or a half FTE kind of position? So we can, I know Leo's out of town. She's back next week, correct? Okay. Perhaps we can ask her to present that to us at the next meeting, and then that would be a item up for discussion as we're reviewing the budget.
Could it be in writing? I'm sorry. Could it be in writing?
Yes, it should be in writing. I think it should be written as most of a job, duties and description would be. I'm sure it can be formalized by our attorneys in whatever format, but. And if it's not possible at that time, then, maybe it's not a part of our budget and it comes back to us mid-year next year if there, are decisions that we need to make and dollars that can be spent to do that in FY26. Any further discussion on the items in the mental health board budget or agency efficiencies? Okay. Then moving on to the administrative expenses, non-personnel. I have had, so this kind of ties into our zero-based budgeting and just a better, clearer understanding of what's going on with our dollars. So I have asked Mel to give us a piece of paper, and then there's also something in our packet on page 9 of 10. And Melanie is going to explain page 9 of 10. Oh.
So basically what this is, it's all the line items from our non-personnel budget and how much flexibility there is in them. Like green items, we assess every year what we think we're going to need when we're developing the budget. Like we'll list out all the memberships that we had, and are we going to maintain these memberships? Is there other memberships to be added? So these green items are basically under staff/board control as far as how much we're going to put in them, if we need to put in them. But we identify every year what we are going to use in those accounts. The orange items are our least flexible items, like we know we have to have insurance and we don't have that much control over what our premiums are going to be. So we typically take the last year's actual and multiply it by 8%, and we're usually pretty close to what we wind up paying. Other things like, utilities, we know we can't go without paying heat, and so we base it on history and what we expect the change in the market to be. So those orange ones are kind of more set in stone, that we really don't have much flexibility based on the number of vendors available or, the necessity of that service. And then the blue items are kind of a mix of expenses, some contractual that we can't get away without doing, and others where, say, buildings and grounds, where we can say, okay, we're going to do these certain projects, we're going to maintain these certain areas, so these costs will be in there. This year, we don't need to do paving or the seal coating because we did it last year. So we, on an annual basis, evaluate all the things we have to do and all the things we want to do to kind of come up with those blue budget items. So this is just kind of like an overview for people new on the board so they can kind of understand how we come up with these items. Every item is looked at individually. Some items we have more control over than others as far as what we budget for them. So any questions on that? And, like I said, I try to explain in the comments on the budget what each of them is made up in. so you have an idea. But if there's anything where you ever question what's in that budget item or budget line, like I said, feel free to ask questions. I'm more than happy to answer.
Great. Under the same topic, in front of you, and this is a last-minute addition, is this blue spreadsheet. This stemmed from a conversation that I had actually with Carolyn about some desire to show our administrative budget, our actual, our operating, and our original budget items. So in talking with Melanie, there is a report that she's able to generate rather quickly. Now, we did this half an hour before this meeting started. So in the first column under dimension values, she can actually add the narrative of what that thing is. We just didn't have the time to do it. So this would allow you to look at this. I had her print out a copy of last year's budget because it actually shows some of the items that have moved. Now, a discussion that we had, and I wanted some board input on, is that she does give us a current template that she uses to show us these things, and she can modify this document pretty easily to put in just a little bit more information that we would get. And, use either some color coding or highlighting when something is moving or changing. And this discussion Carolyn and I had was a little bit about an easier ability to see when things moved, why they moved, and as a tool for us as we're looking at our administrative budget as board members, to be able to say what happened, why did it happen, and then as we're reviewing what staff are recommending for administrative budget, it could draw our attention a little bit to areas that we might want to investigate further. So I wanted to open it up to see if what your guys' feelings are on receiving this kind of format, additional information that you think would be helpful. And then my goal would be for Melanie to have a little bit more time to show us kind of like a draft template that we might use for all finance meetings moving forward in our next meeting in 2 weeks. So something slightly more polished than what she could cook up 30 minutes ago. So I wanted to open that up. Connie, I see you.
Well, I just don't, I see it, but I don't know what line item it is. I don't know what, like, we had 46% that we used.
So she would be able, in the first column, to give the narrative that would say something like tuition reimbursement or subscriptions.
I think that
those things would automatically be added in. It just wasn't able to be done this quickly.
Because if you look at it, just glance at it, you see the ones that 46% was used or 207% was used. You know that you're going to need more money there, and you could use less money there. So we could look at the budget that way once we know what it is.
Carol?
Thanks. I want to say thank you, Melanie. This is great. This is exactly.
It'd be even better if you understood what the numbers meant, right?
I got the idea, though.
Right.
So, thank you, Lindsay, for working with me on it, because in particular, going into the budget, and making the budget, developing the budget. On a monthly basis, it's not as critical as really understanding, when we're entering into the budget and how we want to set the budget. And I even think, if this is something that is fairly easy to do as we go into the budget, maybe like the past 2 years would be really beneficial, because the FY25, honestly, we're so early in it. It's not hugely helpful in really developing. It's kind of seeing those patterns year after year and kind of decisions we made and how it ended up the year, but really knowing the movements in between is very helpful. So I appreciate it. And the color coding on that too is excellent to see. So this is really, really good, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So we'll have her kind of polish something up for us then, and if that's something that and then I think there would be no problem in maybe emailing out FY23 and 24 as soon as it's ready, if possible. and even in rough draft form. And then moving forward, we did have a discussion about, how easy it would be to note a decision memo that was made that, would move a line item or who was making a decision. As we know, Leo does have some authority to move, things around in the admin budget. That's a little bit harder, but I think using this for, moving forward, if we can kind of color code when it's occurring, would be easier to go back to the meeting minutes to see a decision memo and hopefully limit the amount of, investigating it would take to understand why certain decisions were made. Any further discussion, suggestions? Okay, let's move on to FY26 fund balance utilization plan. So this is where we're going to talk about how much fund balance we're going to recommend putting into our client services going into FY26. I do want to, give some rough numbers as I realize we are talking conceptually about concepts like flat funding. But just as an example, if we go back to this sheet where we're looking at the forecasting, if we want to take an approach of flat funding, which would mean that we're going to put the same number of dollars into our client services bucket to be allocated later on this year, that we would be looking at using approximately $2.1 million of fund balance in order to support that. And Melanie's going to correct me.
Sorry, I did want to point out that this plan also assumes we're doing the bathroom remodel at $450,000 and the deputy director at $129,000. So that $2.1 million could be less if those things are not happening. So. They're at the bottom of the sheet in the purple, in the blue.
On this sheet, right here, yeah.
So those two amounts could potentially be removed from that fund balance.
And if we wanted to move forward with a $2.1 million or less, if we're going to consider those other bathroom and deputy director positions, this would still put us on track to be able to every year take the same approach of keeping the same pool of dollars in there. Obviously, that doesn't account for any cost of living or anything that could happen, and it's all based on all these forecasting numbers that could or could not be true. So we do need, as a board, as part of what Melanie needs to do, if we're going to approve a budget recommendation from Finance Committee next time, give her some direction as to what we're thinking as far as fund balance utilization going into FY26. So I wanted to open it up to discussion on that topic and or questions. Carolyn?
And I'm sorry, with the 450,000, and you may have said it, and I was just kind of keeping track of stuff. And I know our discussion in building and grounds that was going to,
350,000 was the
or
number.
I even think it was even lower than that potentially. So that's an option, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
kind of on the high side there.
That's on the high side, it's potentially, it sounds like the number is going to be lower than that. But that was the number that had been in the budget last year for it.
Right.
So I think it would be more to the 250 to 300,000.
Okay.
So that number could also change, yes.
Because that would then bring us, a little bit, it would bring us down to more like this year and where
Like
we
the
were at.
1.9.
Yeah. And, I mean, just that one minor change, which I think is more of a reality, at least that would be a better starting point, I think. And I think the other one is still up for a great deal of discussion.
Right.
Thanks.
I will speak, I agree with Carolyn. I think I'd like to, not put that money into the budget if not necessary, and make sure that we're protecting it as much as possible. Obviously, there's a open for discussion as a board if people are wanting to do more than this because they want to put more into client services. There's been some discussions that I've had about slowly reducing, the number of dollars that we put into client services. Some board members have talked with me about not having a steep drop-off at any point in the future, which may look like being good stewards of our money every single year, moving towards that 2031, 2032 date where sales tax dollars catch up. I personally think that we should go into FY26 absolutely meeting the levels that we had in FY25, which gives our funded providers, more time to pivot. I'm also concerned about some of the implications of, Medicaid and what that could do. So I would like to, have the ability, if any kind of urgent issues arise, to keep that in mind. However, that doesn't mean that we can't, make a mid-year decision if some sort of urgent situation comes to fruition. So I'd be in favor of a $1.9 million recommendation for fund balance. Carolyn?
I'm sorry, one more thing. So if we kind of recommend that now, can we reevaluate when we're actually discussing about the budget? I'm fine with that, and I'm just wondering if, there's maybe some more movement within there, and it could go more to allocations and services, and so as long as
It's
that's,
basically a starting point.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good with that then.
Yeah. Are there other areas that you want staff to investigate for movement? Oh, that's okay. Hold on.
No, you first.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay. Carolyn?
No, I just think I'm curious just to see where the recommendations come out, and using kind of that sheet, I think there's, a little more movement. It's not going to be $500,000, but, I think at this point, anything we can kind of shift from one area that hasn't been utilized into an area that we needed is critical, and it's valuable and impactful. So there's not a specific area, but I do think that there will be conversations, and I think where I'm kind of at on some of those. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Chris?
Yeah, I appreciate all of the efforts that you're making, staff making, to help us be mindful about our decision-making. So I do, want to make sure we know when we're going to try and have our sort of 5-year capital expenditures plan, and that we're tracking. I'd like to kind of see a live graph of how we're doing in terms of sales tax returns relative to projections over the course of time. I know it's early days, so we may not know that yet, but I want us to keep our thumb on the pulse of that metric. And, I kind of want to pick up this idea that I kind of brought up earlier regarding, we've talked about zero-based budgeting, and, when I brought that issue up, I said thought experiment. And my real area of focus around that is us being knowledgeable and aware of the needs assessment conducted for our county, and to be reflective on that to demonstrate where the unmet needs are. Like, we need to be attentive to that, and I don't think we have anything right now that looks like what I envision when I think of a needs assessment. And as we heard earlier, the Mental Health Board has been kind of integral to developing new services when the county has needed it, Family Health Partnership, as an example. My fear is that the needs like those are out there and unknown to us. And I want us to be attentive to that, so when we think about our allocations, I want to keep flat funding for the agencies that have that. I don't want to see that go down. But if we're able to create efficiencies, where I want that to go is toward the needs in the community. So I want us to be really thoughtful about ensuring we have increased information to guide that thinking.
Connie?
I just want to answer Chris's thoughts. Mainly in the community, if there is a need, the first place they come to fund it and I've been on the board a long time, is the mental health board. And I'm just saying, if there is a need, they usually come here to, or they go to another agency and that agency comes here. So, but I do like the needs assessment, but I don't think a lot of people, when I see the numbers that fill out the need assessment, it's really not the county need assessment. I wish we had something more, but we don't.
Chris?
Yeah, so when you say they, you're talking about the services that already exist. And, I absolutely appreciate and recognize that the services we have are filling distinct needs that I personally have not observed duplication of client services, transportation potentially aside, I don't know. And the fact that there are waiting lists indicate that these are not redundant, unneeded services. I absolutely recognize that. At the same time, there may be needs that these agencies are not meeting, so they are not coming to us because they all, that's a different type of service that doesn't, currently get addressed right now. So I want us to use and use information to make sure that that's not the case.
How would you suggest?
Well, doing a needs assessment, an actual, like a more robust needs assessment, potentially, we could say that.
So once again, just always trying to take discussion into action, are you interested in having staff sort of present to us how, like, maybe a proposed plan to be able to get more robust needs information so that we can make those? Okay. Okay. Any further discussion on the fund balance utilization plan? So far, what I've heard is a starting point of 1.9 million and to investigate some of those efficiencies that could be present based on previous discussion. And then we will be presented that in 2 weeks for more in-depth conversation. Any further discussion?
I have one discussion for you.
Connie?
Just, we're having 2 meetings this month. Are we going to have like 2 meetings each month in finance? I just need to plan okay.
This meeting was actually rescheduled. We were supposed to move to monthly meetings, but due to a quorum issue
Right.
a couple weeks ago, this meeting got bumped up. So the plan was to be monthly until we could get through all of these. So I do believe that we'll keep up with a monthly pace so that some of the allocation conversations that we're delaying can be brought up and discussed. And Bridget can remind us of all those dates that are up and coming. All right, then without any further comments or discussion, motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
We
you.
are adjourned.